The corridor smelled wrong. Captain Marcus Chen had walked this stretch of the Valtharian royal palace 17 times in the past 3 cycles, and the air had always carried the faint sweetness of nocturnal bloom flowers. Tonight it reeked of copper and something sharper, something that made his human hindbrain scream warnings his training forced him to ignore. His boots made no sound on the polished obsidian floor as he approached the intersection where the Queen's chambers branched left and Princess Sarah's apartments veered right. The warnings had started 2 days ago. Lieutenant Voss, pale-faced despite a decade of diplomatic service, had cornered him in the guard rotation room. "Request reassignment," she'd said. "Princess Sarah enters her breeding cycle in 48 hours. The Valtharians have protocols for a reason, but Captain Chen's assignment came directly from Queen Lysara herself, stamped with the sovereign seal that turned suggestions into cosmic law. He would guard the northern approach. He would maintain his post. He would not abandon his duty because biology made other species uncomfortable. Now he understood why Voss had looked so haunted. The scream that split the silence wasn't loud. It was worse than loud. It was a child's voice wrapped in absolute terror, the kind of sound that existed in the same frequency as shattering bone in final breaths. Chen's hand found his sidearm before conscious thought caught up. 3 seconds to assess, 5 to decide. Protocol demanded he signal the central guard station before investigating. Protocol also didn't account for that sound. He moved. The princess's wing should have been sealed, guarded by 2 Valtharian sentinels whose loyalty was enforced through genetic conditioning. Instead, the ornate doors gaped open, and something dark pooled on the threshold. Not blood. Valtharian blood ran silver. This was thicker, blacker, and it absorbed light like a hungry mouth. Chen stepped over it, weapon raised, and immediately wished he hadn't. Princess Sarah crouched in the center of her reception chamber, and the diplomatic briefings hadn't prepared him for this. Her usually violet skin had flushed to deep crimson, the color of emergency flares against a dying sun. Her forearms trembled in positions that mimicked threat displays, but her eyes held no aggression, only confusion. Only desperate, animal fear. The pheromone cloud hit him like a physical force, and Chen's body responded with inappropriate heat before his implant kicked in, flooding his bloodstream with suppressants. "Captain." Her voice cracked on the word, each syllable shaped wrong by a physiology not meant for human speech. "The child. I can't." Then he saw the boy. Human. Maybe 8 standard years old. Definitely not supposed to be anywhere near the royal apartments during a breeding cycle. He'd wedged himself into the corner where 2 walls met, arms wrapped around his knees, and his eyes were too wide, seeing things no child should witness. Blood seeped from his nose, and when he saw Chen, he whispered a single word: monster. Chen's training warred with instinct. The princess was a diplomatic guest of the highest priority. Harming her would trigger an interstellar incident that could collapse the fragile alliance between humanity and the Valtharian collective. But the boy was bleeding, and something had clearly gone catastrophically wrong, and the princess's 4 hands kept reaching toward the child, then jerking back as if burned. "Princess Sarah." Chen kept his voice level, weapon pointed at the floor but ready. "Step away from the child." "I didn't know he was here." Her breathing came too fast, each exhale releasing more of those pheromones that made the air shimmer.
"The heat came early."
"The protocols should have, the guards should have. Where are they?" Where was the medical team that should have been monitoring her cycle? Where was anyone besides 1 human captain, 1 alien princess in biological crisis, and 1 terrified child? The answer arrived in the form of Queen Lysara herself. She didn't walk. She flowed, each movement precise and inevitable as a blade finding flesh. The queen stood 7 feet tall, her skin the deep purple of old royalty, and her 6 arms moved in patterns that spoke a language older than human civilization. When she entered the chamber, Princess Sarah immediately dropped into a submissive crouch, all 4 arms pressed to the floor. The queen's eyes found Chen. Found the boy, found her sister's trembling form. 1 second passed. 2, 3. When she finally spoke, her voice could have frozen stars. "The child will come with me. You will remain with my sister. You will not leave this room. You will not call for assistance. You will not speak of what you've seen." Each sentence landed like a physical blow. "Do you understand, Captain?" The boy was still bleeding. The princess was clearly in distress. Every regulation, every protocol, every shred of his training demanded he refuse. But Queen Lysara's smallest hand made a gesture he'd seen only once before, during the signing of the peace accords. It was the signal that meant a single word in Valtherian: trust. "I understand," Chen said, and watched the Queen lift the boy with impossible gentleness and carry him into the darkness beyond the door. The lock engaged with a sound like a coffin ceiling. Princess Sarah raised her head, tears streaming silver down crimson skin, and whispered, "She's going to kill me." "No," Chen replied, though he had no idea if that was true. "She's going to protect you." The princess laughed, and it sounded like screaming. Hours bled together in the sealed chamber. Princess Sarah's biology fought against itself, instincts demanding release while consciousness fought for control. Chen maintained position near the door, weapon holstered now but hand near it, watching the princess cycle through stages of the breeding heat he'd only read about in classified briefings. The pheromones eventually overwhelmed his implant, leaving him dizzy and fighting his own inappropriate responses. But he'd endured worse: torture resistance training, nerve agent exposure. That mission on Kepler, 442b, where the atmospheric pressure had slowly crushed his eardrums while he held position for 16 hours. This was just another test of will. He could pass it. "Tell me about the child." Chen kept his voice conversational, giving Sarah something to focus on besides her body's rebellion. "He shouldn't have been here." The princess had moved to the far wall, pressing herself against the cool stone as if it could leach the heat from her blood. "The palace staff knows. Everyone knows. During the cycle, my wing is forbidden. Genetic imperatives override conscious control. I could hurt someone. I could kill someone." Her forearms wrapped around herself. "I felt him before I saw him. Small. Prey instincts screaming in my hindbrain. And I wanted—" Chen didn't make her. Barely. One of her hands touched her throat. For maybe 10 seconds, I wasn't Sarah. I was just hunger and need and the biological programming that says take what you want, consequences are for after. Then I saw his face. Saw the terror. And I managed to pull back enough to scream for help. Her eyes met his. "Why didn't you run? The moment you saw me like this, you should have fled. I don't abandon posts, even when staying might get you killed, especially then." The princess made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Humans are insane." The briefings didn't mention that part. The briefings leave out a lot. Chen shifted his weight, joints protesting the long stillness. "Why would a child be in the palace? During your cycle, during lockdown?" "I don't know." Sarah's voice had steadied slightly, the conversational anchor helping her find center. "Ambassador's son, maybe? Someone's pet project given too much freedom? Doesn't matter. What matters is Lysara found him here, found me like this, and now she has to decide what to do." "Decide what?" The princess's laugh was bitter. "Whether I'm worth the political catastrophe. Harming a human child, even accidentally, even while not in control, could shatter the alliance. The collective has enemies who would love an excuse to paint us as dangerous, unstable, unfit for diplomatic relations, and I just handed them that excuse wrapped in a bow." Chen started to respond, but movement at the door froze him. Not the main entrance. The servants' passage, the one he'd been told was sealed during lockdowns. The panel slid open silently, and Queen Lysara entered alone. No guards. No child, no witnesses. She looked at Sarah first, assessment clinical and complete in 3 seconds. Then her attention fixed on Chen with weight that made his bones ache. "The boy's name is Thomas Reeves. He's the son of engineering specialist Patricia Reeves, assigned to the palace maintenance crew. He was exploring where he should not have been, driven by the curiosity of youth and the arrogance of a species that hasn't yet learned fear." The Queen's voice held no inflection. His nose bled from a pheromone reaction, nothing more. He is unharmed. He has been returned to his mother with a story about getting lost and frightened. "He didn't tell her? About me?" "He told her he saw a monster." She assumed he meant the palace architecture. Humans often find Valtherian design unsettling. The Queen's smallest hands made a dismissive gesture. "The incident is contained. The alliance stands. You are fortunate, sister." "Fortunate?" Sarah's voice cracked. "I nearly killed a child. I lost control. I failed every protocol, and you recognized danger. You pulled back. You called for help instead of giving in to base instinct. That is not failure. That is the difference between a princess and an animal." She moved closer, and something in her posture softened by microscopic degrees. The cycle came early. The guards were stationed for tomorrow's onset. The medical team was not yet in position. "The failure was ours, not yours." Because you fought yourself and won. Queen Lysera's largest arms opened slightly, invitation and command together. Sarah moved into the embrace, and Chen looked away, giving them privacy in a moment too raw for outside eyes. Captain Chen. The Queen's voice pulled his attention back. You maintained your post despite biological warfare your species was never meant to withstand. You did not flee. You did not harm my sister when she was vulnerable. You gave her something to focus on besides the storm in her blood. A pause. Why? Chen met her eyes. Because she needed help, and I was there. That's what guards do. Human guards, perhaps? Valtharian guards would have sealed the door from outside and waited for the cycle to pass. They would have prioritized protocol over presence. The Queen's head tilted. Your species chooses strange hills to die on. We prefer not to die on any hills, Your Majesty. But if we have to pick, helping someone in crisis seems like a good option. The alliance was built on the assumption that our species could coexist despite biological differences. Tonight tested that assumption. It held. She released Sarah, who looked steadier now, the crimson of her skin fading back toward violet. Return to your post, Captain. The night shift will proceed as scheduled. We will not speak of this again. The boy, Chen started, will forget most of this by morning. Pheromone exposure creates unreliable memories in humans. He'll retain vague impressions of fear and confusion, nothing more. The Queen's tone allowed no argument. His mother knows nothing. The guards know nothing. This chamber knows what happened, and this chamber will keep its secrets. Should have filed a report. Should have done 100 things that regulations demanded. Instead, he nodded once and moved toward the door. Captain? Sarah's voice stopped him. Thank you for not running. For treating me like a person instead of a threat. You were both, Chen said honestly. But person came first. He left them there, 2 alien royals in a sealed chamber, and resumed his patrol of the northern corridor. The air still smelled wrong, but the wrongness was fading. By the time his shift ended at dawn, the scent of nocturnal bloom flowers had returned, sweet and innocent, as if nothing had ever disturbed the palace's peace. Lieutenant Voss was waiting when he clocked out. You survived, she said, and something in her voice suggested she hadn't expected him to. I maintained my post, Chen corrected. That's different? Is it? Voss stepped closer, lowering her voice. I heard things. Rumors. A child in the wrong place. The Queen moving through the palace at speed. Long silence from the northern corridor. Her eyes searched his face. What happened, Marcus? I guarded the approach, he said. Nothing more. The smart thing would be to request transfer. To take the rotation that keeps you far from the royal apartments for the next cycle. To learn from this. And the right thing? To prove that humans can be trusted with the hard posts, the dangerous ones, the assignments that require more than just following orders, she smiled faintly. But I wouldn't presume to tell you which choice to make. Shen thought about Princess Sarah's trembling arms, about the terror in a child's eyes, about Queen Lysera's quiet trust that he would do the right thing even when the right thing wasn't clear, about the smell of blood and pheromones and the way his training had held against instinct. I'll stay, he said. Someone needs to guard the northern approach. Of course you will. Try not to die doing it. 3 weeks later, Princess Sarah's cycle completed without incident. The proper protocols were in place, the guards were positioned, the medical team monitored every fluctuation. Everything proceeded exactly as it should have, boring and safe and utterly unremarkable. Captain Marcus Chen maintained his post, walking the northern corridor in steady patrols, and the air smelled of nocturnal bloom flowers and nothing else. Once, passing the princess's chambers, he heard laughter, young voices, a human child and an alien princess, playing some game that transcended species. The Queen found him there, standing guard in the darkness. The boy asked to visit, she said without preamble. His mother approved. Sarah requested permission to apologize properly. I allowed it. A pause. You object? No, Your Majesty. Allowing them contact after what happened? Chen considered his words carefully. I think fear grows in silence. Understanding needs exposure. If we keep them apart forever, that one bad moment becomes the only story. This way, they get to write a different ending. The Queen's expression remained unreadable, but her smallest hand made that gesture again. Trust. My sister speaks highly of you, Captain. She says you treated her with dignity when she had none left to claim, that you gave her space to be frightened and weak without judgment. She was having a hard night, Chen said simply. We all need someone to stand watch when darkness gets too close. Humans have a saying, I believe, about the content of character being revealed not in moments of comfort but in times of challenge. The Queen's eyes reflected the corridor lights, deep and fathomless. You revealed yourself that night, Captain Chen. The Alliance is stronger for it. She left him there, alone in the darkness, guarding an approach that would likely never see attack. But guards didn't serve only to prevent violence. Sometimes they stood watch so others could be vulnerable, so children could play, so princesses could heal, so trust could grow in the spaces fear had scorched. Captain Marcus Chen adjusted his stance, checked his weapon from habit, and resumed his patrol.
The corridors smelled sweet.
The night was quiet, and somewhere in the chambers behind him laughter echoed against ancient walls, writing a new story in a language both species could understand. He had been warned about the alien sister in heat, about the biological imperatives that could turn sapience into savagery, but no one had warned him about the alien queen who would guard the night with trust instead of protocol, or about the child who would teach both species that monsters were just people having the worst day of their lives, or about the princess who would fight her own biology and win because someone believed she could. They had warned him, but they hadn't told him everything. And in the gap between warning and truth, something new had grown. Something that looked like understanding, like alliance, like the fragile hope that two species could stand watch together when darkness pressed too close. Captain Marcus Chen walked his patrol boots silent on polished obsidian and knew that he would never request reassignment. This was his post. This was his duty. Not because regulations demanded it, but because someone had to stand in the spaces between species and prove that trust was stronger than fear, that dignity mattered more than protocol, and that the hardest watch was often the most important one. The nocturnal bloom flowers released their sweetness into the air, and the palace slept in peace, and the guards stood watch. Just another night. Just another shift. Just another quiet moment where nothing happened and everything changed. The alliance would endure. The stories would spread. And somewhere in the archives of both species, a report would be filed that said simply, "Incident resolved, post maintained. No casualties." But the truth was bigger than any report could hold. The truth was that when crisis came in the dark, when biology warred with consciousness, when a child's scream split the silence, people on both sides of the species divide had chosen to be more than their programming. They had chosen trust over fear, understanding over judgment, presence over abandonment, and in that choice they had built something stronger than any alliance treaty could guarantee. They had built the foundation for actual peace, the kind that couldn't be negotiated or signed or enforced. The kind that grew in the spaces between heartbeats, watered by moments of vulnerability and sheltered by those willing to stand watch when the night grew long. Captain Marcus Chen reached the end of his patrol route, turned, and began again. The corridor stretched before him, familiar and strange, a path he would walk 1,000 more times in service to something bigger than himself. And he would walk it gladly, knowing that somewhere behind him a princess slept peacefully, a child laughed without fear, and a queen ruled with the kind of wisdom that understood some things couldn't be commanded, only chosen, only built, only guarded through the long watches of the night. The flowers bloomed, the guards stood watch, and the alliance held.